It was a day like any other in the peaceful, yet overly regulated community of Maple Grove. Mark Anderson woke to the rhythmic sounds of metal clanking and distant, excited voices from outside his bedroom window. Initially, he thought it was the garbage truck showing up a bit earlier than usual, but as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes and peeked through the blinds, his heart dropped in disbelief. His backyard, once a source of pride with its meticulously trimmed grass and flourishing flower beds, had been transformed into an extravagant wedding venue without his permission. Rows of white folding chairs were aligned as if waiting for an audience, and at the far end, a flower-adorned arch stood ready to frame the nuptials. A bustling crew of decorators flitted around, setting up what appeared to be an elaborate ceremony, complete with a DJ testing sound equipment near the fence and a catering truck parked in his driveway. Mark's stomach twisted. This was not how he had envisioned his peaceful weekend morning. There, directing the chaos with an almost regal demeanor, was the self-proclaimed matriarch of the neighborhood, Brenda, his next-door neighbor and the unofficial president of their homeowners association, HOA. The woman had a reputation for bending the rules to serve her own interests, and today seemed no different. Clenching his fists, Mark threw on a worn-out hoodie and stormed out of the back door, marching straight toward the spectacle unfolding in his yard. "Brenda," he called out, his voice slicing through the chatter like a knife. She spun around, a smug smile on her face. "Mark, glad to see you're finally awake. We were just starting to worry you'd miss your own backyard bash." Mark blinked, incredulous. What in the world is going on here? Why is there a wedding happening in my yard? "Oh, don't be so melodramatic. It's just for the day," Brenda replied dismissively, waving her hand as if he were merely a child throwing a tantrum. "My daughter's wedding. You should feel honored we chose your lovely yard for such an important occasion." Mark felt the blood rush to his face. "I don't recall receiving any notice or invitation. This is trespassing. Get your stuff out of my yard." Brenda's demeanor shifted from casual arrogance to borderline menacing. "Oh, Mark, dear, you're making this very complicated. Do you really want to be the sole person in the neighborhood who ruins my daughter's special day?" His fists clenched tighter. "I don't care about your daughter's special day. This is my property." "Oh, but it's far more complicated than that," she replied, a glint of cold satisfaction in her eyes. According to HOA regulations, community events can be hosted in any suitable space approved by the board, and guess what? Your lawn is deemed suitable. Mark's mind raced as he absorbed her words, knotting his stomach in frustration. He knew all too well that Brenda had been twisting HOA rules to her convenience for years. This was unprecedented insanity. "You can't simply—" "Actually, we can," she interrupted, her saccharine tone dripping with condescension. "And unless you'd like to see hefty fines for an unsightly lawn or unauthorized external modifications. Let's see, what else is in the rule book? Oh yes, parking violations. It would be just terrible if you were deemed in violation of several codes this fine day." Slick with anger, Mark turned away to take a breath. Brenda's threats were obviously designed to intimidate him, but he wasn't about to back down without a fight. The wedding was less than 6 hours away, and with every passing minute, more decorations were being put in place and guests were arriving. He retreated into the sanctuary of his home and slammed the door shut behind him, his mind racing for solutions. There had to be a way to turn this situation around. If she had declared war, he would counterattack. A wicked thought struck him as he recalled the old sprinkler system buried beneath his lawn. It hadn't been used in years, the water stagnant and filthy, but it was still functional. Was it wrong to consider flooding out the wedding? A malicious grin crept onto his face as he began to formulate his plan. Moving toward the garage, he rummaged through tools until he found the dusty controls for the antiquated system. The underground pipes had long been tagged as a lurking hazard, waiting just for a moment like this. All he needed to do was wait for the opportune moment. The instant the bride would be crossing the threshold of the aisle, when everyone would be focused on the festivities. As he watched through his kitchen window, the chaotic scene unfolded outside. Brenda, completely oblivious to his simmering fury, was basking in the attention. Mark winced as a gaggle of giggling bridesmaids posed for selfies by his prized koi pond, completely disregarding the fact that he had never consented to this monumental invasion of his space. His phone buzzed. It was Carl, one of the few level-headed neighbors left in the vicinity. "Hey, Mark, I heard about what's going on. It's wild." "What do you mean, wild?" "She's turned my yard into a wedding venue without my approval," Mark retorted, frustration lacing his words. "Yeah, that's Brenda for you. She twisted the HOA rules to suit herself as always. If you try to fight it, she'll bury you under a mountain of bogus violations." Mark rubbed his temples. "I need something that she can't twist. Something to ruin this whole spectacle legally." Carl hesitated before responding, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "You might not want to hear this, but Brenda didn't just pick your yard because it's nice. Word has it that she mismanaged the HOA event funds and was counting on your lawn to save her hide." Mark's grip tightened on the phone as a flicker of realization dawned on him. Brenda wasn't just manipulating him. She was desperately trying to cover her tracks. It was time to make the grandest move in neighborhood history. "Thanks for the tip," he muttered. He ended the call, refocusing on his grim task. Timing would be everything. As chaos descended in the backyard, he knew he'd have to strike at just the right time when all eyes were on the bride. Tick-tock, the hands of his clock were turning. Hours passed and the ceremony approached. Outside, laughter and chatter reverberated, but Mark was immune to the sound. He paced through his kitchen, the rhythm of his heart syncing with the anticipation of impending chaos. He carefully adjusted the controls inside the garage to prepare for the erratic sprinkler system he had just revived. Then, a knock on his front door jolted him momentarily. A nervous man stood on the other side, dressed in a tuxedo, his brow glistening with anxiety. Hi, you must be Mark?" the man stuttered. "I'm Richard, the groom." Mark narrowed his eyes at this unexpected visitor. "You're marrying Brenda's daughter, I presume." "Yeah," Richard said, scratching his head awkwardly. "Look, I'm really sorry about all this. I had no idea she was planning this without telling you." Mark studied him for a moment. "So, Brenda lied to everyone about this?" Richard sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Trust me, I'm learning fast how controlling she can be. My fiancée wanted something small and intimate, but her mother blew it up into this circus. I had no idea we were crashing someone's private property." Mark resisted the urge to feel sympathy for the guy. "You really sure you want to be bound to such family drama? Because right now, it looks like this wedding is about to turn into a spectacular disaster." Richard's brow furrowed further. "What do you mean?" Mark simply smiled, turning back toward the window to observe the unfolding disaster with glee. "Let's just say I have a few tricks up my sleeve." As the minutes ticked away, Mark could see Brenda waving her arms as though conducting an orchestra, and the guests were taking their seats. He was filled with a thrill of anticipation. The timing had to be perfect. Then a voice called again, Everyone, let's take our places. The moment is almost here. Mark grinned, his heart racing. The moment was upon them. He flicked the switch in the garage, and the first sputtering sound came from the sprinklers. No one seemed to notice. One small gurgle and a hiss before the system burst into life. With that, chaos erupted. The underground pipes unleashed a torrent of muddy water, spraying the front rows with a rust-colored sewage-like sludge. Guests screamed and scrambled, trying to escape the deluge splattering their impeccable attire. The DJ's equipment sparked, and the bridesmaids tripped and fell in their efforts to outrun the swirling chaos. The entire backyard devolved into a swamp. Just as Richard's bride, Stephanie, prepared to make her grand entrance, she found herself knee-deep in sludge instead of stepping onto the flower-lined aisle. Her stunning gown was instantly ruined, and her shriek of dismay filled the air. Mark stood on his porch, arms crossed, delighting in the spectacle. Brenda's face shifted from joy to pure horror as she raced toward the source of the mishap. "You did this," she yelled, pointing a finger. Mark leaned on the railing, feigning innocence. "Oh, it seems I'm having some plumbing issues. Maybe you should have booked a real venue instead of commandeering my property without permission." Brenda's eyes widened with rage. "You ruined my daughter's wedding." "Did I?" Mark shot back, unconcerned. "Just remember, you never had permission to use my yard in the first place." As the chaos raged on, Brenda's guests began to whisper amongst themselves, phones pulled out and capturing the calamity in real time. "You told me everything was planned," shouted Stephanie at her mother, her beginnings of tears now transformed into fury. "You lied. You didn't even ask him." The groom, Richard, stepped forward incredulously. "Brenda, this is insane. You told us we were booked into a proper venue." "I can fix this," she blurted desperately, trying to salvage the situation by calling for order among the guests. But it was futile. The cacophony had already ruined whatever semblance of dignity remained. "Time to head out," Mark taunted as Brenda glared at him, her face flushed red. Just then, a police car pulled up, sirens cutting through the noise. Officers approached the scene, and Mark could hardly contain his joy. Brenda's expression shifted from anger to a sheer terror at the sight. The officers held out their hands, instructing Brenda to stay where she was. "We have reports of an unauthorized event on private property and potential misuse of HOA funds," they said, tones firm as they began questioning the panicked bride and her mother. As Brenda's so-called empire started crumbling before her eyes, Mark savored it all from his porch. This was everything he had wished for long before now. Her incessant entitlement, her misuse of authority, finally surfacing in the most disastrous way possible. The guests gradually began to disperse, leaving in disgust. Cars pulled away from the mounting chaos, and Brenda was left surrounded by remnants of what was supposed to be a magical day. As night fell, Mark stood outside, leveraging every ounce of satisfaction from the wreckage before him. His own yard was demolished, yes, but it felt like a victory. With Brenda's relentless reign finally stymied, the neighbors would now realize that her controlled grip had been suffocating. In the days that followed, the aftermath of the fiasco became a topic of neighborhood discussions. Mark found much joy in watching as Brenda's reputation deteriorated. Other HOA board members began distancing themselves, glancing nervously at the growing scrutiny surrounding her financial decisions. It wouldn't be long before a formal audit was requested, solidifying that Brenda's days manipulating the HOA were numbered. One evening, Mark found himself sipping some iced tea on his front porch when he spotted Brenda packing her things in a frenzy. rushing to load them into her car with a cloak of shame hanging over her. He only smiled. The neighborhood was finally waking to their need for change. His phone chimed, interrupting his thoughts. It was Richard again, calling to inform him that his marriage to Brenda's daughter had officially been called off. "Brenda nearly destroyed us, man." He laughed bitterly. "I don't think Stephanie is ready for this kind of life. Thanks for doing what you did. You saved me from a never-ending nightmare." "Don't mention it," Mark said, relieved. "Just glad I got my yard back. And just think, maybe the HOA won't exist in a few weeks. Maybe you should rent it out for real weddings now," Richard joked. But Mark couldn't muster the enthusiasm. He had had enough of the drama for one lifetime. The sun dipped low as Mark prepared to retire for the evening. Peace at last, he thought. Then his phone buzzed again. The HOA had called for a final meeting to discuss disbanding. He knew he couldn't miss it. As Mark prepared for the meeting, he watched from his porch as Brenda, finally defeated, pulled out of the driveway, her car disappearing down the street. Finally, she was gone. Just like that, the neighborhood began to breathe again, free from the constraints and paranoia that had strangled it for far too long. A whisper of excitement began to spread through Maple Grove. Freedom was just around the corner, and for the first time in a long while, Mark felt hopeful about the future. Life without Brenda's domineering presence opened up possibilities unknown. This was a new beginning.